Hello.
Hello.
Hello and welcome to our panel debate, The New Order in the Middle East, Conflict Constellations, Hegemonic Endeavours and Solution Perspectives. Over the next 2 hours, we will be looking at developments in the Middle East, particularly around Syria, Rojava and Turkey. I'm delighted that we have 3 excellent speakers tonight. Professor Dr. Hamit Bozarslan from EHESS in France, Sinam Mohamad, the Syrian Democratic Council representative to the United States, and Dr. Salim Çevik, German Institute for International and Security Affairs, the SWP in Germany. Welcome to all of you. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation. All 3 of you will first give their speeches, and afterwards we will have a Q&A session. But to begin with, I would like to emphasize an important aspect, which I'm sure we will also talk about during the next 2 hours. It's the issue of war crimes and reappraisal of them for reconciliation. An important step was the criminal complaint, the Kurdish academic network Kurd-Akad, together with the Association for Democracy and International Law, filed with the Federal Public Prosecutor's Office in Germany in November 2024. The criminal complaint focused on the bombing of medical centers by Turkey in Rojava in December 2024. And another important step is the Permanent People's Tribunal, Rojava versus Turkey, which will take place on 5 and 6 February in Brussels, in Belgium, and which is being organized by various legal organizations in cooperation with the Permanent People's Tribunal. Detailed information on this important event can be found on the homepage rojavapeoplestribunal.org. Now let us start with our speakers. Professor Bozarslan will speak on the title, The Middle East at a Turning Point, Threats and Options. Please, Hamit, the floor is yours. Hamit, you have to switch on your...
Sorry. Thank you, Dersim. Thank you, Dersim, for organizing this meeting and having me today. And thank you also for giving these informations. They are very important informations because I think that these files have to be, the persecution has to take place. So you asked me to intervene on the Middle East and the changes in the Middle East. And of course, we have a kind of acceleration in the Middle East. One of the most important sociologists of the 20th century, Zygmunt Bauman, used the concept of the liquid modernity, and we had a kind of liquid modernity in some periods of the Middle East. In some other periods, we had a kind of coagulation periods. In both cases, they were very bloody ones. And today we see that after 1 decade of coagulation, we have a kind of acceleration of the history. Of course, everything started on October 7 in Gaza. And the Gaza conflict means that on one side we have a mass crime, and I think that nothing can justify what the Hamas has done. And that was not only an ethical problem, that was also a problem of the destruction of the rationality, not thinking what the Israeli answer will be. And on the other hand, of course, the devastation, a war of devastation, which targeted not only the Hamas organization, but the Palestinian issue, the Palestinian society as such. And then October 8th, 2023, Nasrallah, Hezbollah organization, has intervened in the war. I remember Nasrallah pointing fingers, threatening fingers, and Nasrallah didn't think not either that the things can change, the things can evolve in a very different way. And finally, of course, the fall of Bashar al-Assad. No one could anticipate this that kind of events. And all the available information attests that Israel did not plan actually to attack Gaza before the 7th of October. And it did not either pay any kind of attention to the reports that were available. And no one could imagine, not either, that there will be a new war with Hezbollah after 2006. Don't forget that the Israeli power regime has lost the war in 2006. So, a turning point, and it is very important to come back to this turning point and to understand what happened, why the Middle East is in such a shape. I think that in order to understand what happened in this region, one should start with Syria, with Syrian fallen regime. In Syria, we had a criminal regime, a brutal regime since 50 years, and this regime actually survived to itself as a zombie power. It was a power of the rituals, it was a power of the underground prisons, it was a power of the Captagon networks, but in reality, the regime did not exist anymore. It was not a legal and rational state, as Max Weber defines the state, but that has never been the case. But what happened during the last months and the last weeks showed that it was not even a regime. It had a militia, but this militia was not an army. It had a social basis, but this social basis was not a social basis that the regime could mobilize. We know that the regime was not an Alawite regime as such. Many opposition figures, they were themselves Alawites. But at the same time, we know also that the main basis of the regime was coming from the Alawite community. And this Alawite community, which is a very small community, 2,200,000 people out of 22 to 23 million of Syrians. And this Alawite community has lost 100,000 men during the civil war. That was a very high price, and this price explains why the regime was not anymore able to mobilize any effects. Bashar al-Assad explained a couple of years ago that, I quote him, "We lost our youth, we lost our infrastructures, but we have become a much better society." That was obviously not the case. The society didn't support, the society itself has been totally destroyed, disintegrated. And when you see what happened in Aleppo, that's quite surrealistic. Actually, those who have conquered Aleppo, they were not more than 400 jihadists. That was not a victory of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, but it was rather a failure of the regime itself. The second point concerns Hezbollah. Hezbollah has always been effective in using to its maximum capacity a power of harming or a power of annoyance. Hezbollah has confiscated the resources of a community, the Shia community, economically, politically, and militarily, and took Lebanon actually into custody for very many long years, and particularly after 2019, when a revolutionary configuration took place in the country. And Hezbollah was powerful enough, actually, because it saved the Syrian regime in 2013. That was the conquest in the so-called conquest of Al-Qusayr in the Syrian border, Syrian-Lebanese border, that allowed to Syrian regime, the Bashar al-Assad regime, to survive. That's because the regime has controlled Al-Qusayr, that it was also able to create a zone covering Damascus, Homs, and going to the Latakia and Tarsus. But this victory and the place that it occupied in Lebanon also showed that Hezbollah was absolutely overconfident. It was overconfident, and didn't see that its survival depended on the status quo and not anymore any kind of fighting with Israel. Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah thought that he would be able to conduct a bloody ping-pong game with Israel, but without taking into consideration that Israel could change the very rules of this game. And at the end, it has paid a very heavy price. And today, the jihadists have conquered Al-Qusayr, showing symbolically that Hezbollah is not anymore a master in Syria. And the third factor that has to be taken into account, that of course, the evolution of Iran. We know that Iran is the host of a country hosting a successive crisis during the last 20, 25 years. And in this country, Khamenei, the leader, the guide, explained a couple of times that the Western countries, would recognize the Republic, the Islamic Republic, if it becomes a republic. But he added, they will never become only exclusively an Islamic Republic. They will remain an Islamic Republic and an Islamic revolution. The ideal that has been the ideal of Khomeini in the beginning of the 1980s, that Iran will transform the Middle East, will be the dominant factor, the dominant and unleashing factor of revolution, Islamic revolution in the Middle East, has never been abandoned. And at the same time, Iran had no social basis within the Sunni communities. It could only export its revolution through the Shia militias in the region. The Syrian regime itself was a militia. The Pasdarans, they are a militia. Hezbollah organization is a militia. And this militia-based strategy or diplomacy reinforced Iran, but exposed also it to very many weaknesses. And the failure of Hezbollah has showed that Iran had no more capacity to act as a superpower in the region. A couple of years ago, an ancient commander of the Basij in Iran, Mehdi Zaad, explained, I quote him, Syria is our 35th province, the most strategically important province. If the enemy attacks and attempts to conquer both Syria and Khuzestan, Khuzestan is a region dominated by the Arab population. If the enemy attacks and attempts to conquer both Syria and Khuzestan, our priority would be Syria. Because if we held Syria, we could then reconquer Khuzestan. But if we lost Syria, we would not even be able to keep Tehran. And I think that just having this analysis in mind, one can imagine the scale of the failure of Iran in the region. In Iran, we have a very tired society, but don't forget that the regime itself is very tired and very weakened, and it is incapable in transforming the war with Israel into full interstate war. And what was very interesting since one and a half years of conflict was to see that Iran could not, the Iranian regime could not mobilize its messianic ideology, and everything remained in a very calculated but failed pragmatic level. And the fourth actor, of course, fourth factor to take into account is Russia. In 2013, the President Obama, American President Obama, has decided not to intervene in Syria, in spite of the fact that the Bashar al-Assad regime had used chemical weapons in the eastern Ghouta. And from that point of view, from that point in time, Russia has imagined itself as a superpower. And there is a direct link between what happened in Syria in 2013 and what happened in Ukraine only 1 year later. For Ukraine, for the Russian president, it was absolutely obvious that the West, I quote him, has no more any honor, has no more any capacity to survive to itself. The new ascending forces are China and Russia. And that was in the wake of this evolution that he negotiated with Turkey and bombed Aleppo in 2015. In 2021, America retired from Afghanistan. That was actually not a failure, militarily speaking. That was a failure in the meaning. America could not explain to itself why it is in Afghanistan, what it's doing in Afghanistan. But that was also interpreted by Russia as the end of the American domination and Western domination and the new war in Ukraine. Since then, the war has devastated actually Russia. Russia has a territory of 17 million square kilometers. That's absolutely huge. But Russia has spent tremendous resources, human resources, economic resources, military resources, since 3 years in order to conquer a couple of thousand square meters. And according to many specialist experts, Russia has lost some 600,000 men, either injured or killed or leave the army. And today, Russia depends very heavily on Korea and Iran in order to maintain this war. And that also showed its failure of becoming a superpower in the Middle East. The impossibility to preserve the Bashar al-Assad regime is obviously a huge failure for Putin. So in Russia, in Syria, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham won. But actually it won not because it was strong, but because all the others, they were weak. And we have to bear that in mind. Hayat Tahrir al-Sham is not and probably will not become a very strong actor unless Turkey fully collaborates with it. And now, from that point of view, we can say that there are many challenges. The first challenge, which concerns the Syrian society as such, is the following. Will the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham cease to be an Islamist movement and allow the establishment of a secular regime in Syria, a plural, secular, non-Islamist regime, a democratic regime which will not be an Islamic emirate, but will be a secularist society. Second, will the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham be able to cease to be a militia, a hegemonic militia force, will be able to refuse to monopolize the power and pave the way for a pluralistic and democratic Syria. I am not sure about neither the first point nor the second one, in spite of all the signals sent by the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham to the world opinion and to the Syrian public opinion. The third issue, which is very important, is to know if the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham will cease to advocate Arabism, which was the dominant ideology in Syria, actually since the 1920s, 1930s, but particularly after the foundation of the Ba'ath party in 1947, and of course, after the successive coup d'etat in 1966, 63, 1966, and 1970. Will Hayat Tahrir al-Sham accept to renounce to the foundations of the Ba'ath ideology which is actually a national socialist ideology, and accepting the principle of a plural and pluralistic Syria with its Kurds, Druzes, Alawites, and Christians. And of course, the last challenge, which concerns the Kurds, but also actually the Syrians as such, the very dignity of the Syrian society, will it be able to challenge Erdogan and Erdoganism and establish a Syrian society and not a Turkish colony? Here too, we have very contradictory signals. At least concerning Turkey, the things are very clear. The Turkish president, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, said only on Saturday, the last Saturday, that Turkey was the ancient owner of the regional cities like Erbil, Damascus, and Baghdad. And he insists persistently on the necessity of to bury terrorism in Syria. And for him, terrorism is the existing Kurdish entity, and not only the autonomous entity, but the very fact that the Kurds try to survive as a collective object, a collective subject of the Syrian society. I think that its main objective is to destroy the Rojava. Will he be able to do that? To what extent? What will be the new American policy? We know that Trump can change his mind very, very easily, but we know that in the high-ranking staff that Trump nominated, there are a couple of people who are opposed to the Turkish hegemony and the Turkish will to destroy the Rojava. What will be the future evolution of Israel, the future evolution of the conflict between Israel and Turkey? What will be the position of the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham vis-a-vis the Kurds? We know that, for instance, they have prevented two massive attacks against the Kurds in Aleppo, coming from the Turkish allies. Will they continue this kind of neutrality? So there are a lot of questions, but I am absolutely sure that Sinam, Mohamad, and Salim Çevik, who are much more qualified than me on these issues, will be able to develop this and these dimensions. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Hamit, for this excellent overview with many information. We will continue with Sinam. She will speak about Syria between a new beginning and challenges. The floor is yours, Sinam.
Thank you so much for having me and organizing this panel. And thank you, and it will be my pleasure to be with the significant speakers today. Professor Hamit, he covered a lot of points about Syria also. Thank you, Mr. Professor. Just I would like to, mention now, during the war in Syria, since 2011 when it started, we have witnessed a lot of challenges that time. So that we saw that the interference in the Syrian issue or the Syrian revolution, as we said, as Turkey, which has a very negative interference in the Syrian issue, supporting the jihadists, supporting some groups who are very radical group, and supporting them or pushing them to fight with the Kurds. This is the goal actually in the beginning. The other issue that makes the Islamic groups come out during the Syrian revolution, which makes every community to support itself and to establish their own immunity in order to protect themselves. As what happened in northeast Syria, and the Kurdish people, how they established their cantons, and then how can extend it and make a good relation with the other community or the other component in the region, like the Syriac and Arabs, till we reach it to the autonomous region, democratic administration in the northeast Syria, This is what we did through the 14 years of this war. So through this war, we could, as a Kurd and as all the components in Syria, in the northeast Syria, we could establish actually a good system that depends or based on the basic freedoms. For instance, freedom of religions, the woman gender equality, which we gave actually a 50% quota for the women participating in all the institution in the administration. All these principles, democracy, pluralities. All this makes the principles, which is really, affiliated with the principles in the Western countries. This is what we needed, actually. So we could establish such a system in our autonomous administration, and this system, which inspired also many other people in Syria to think about it. So this is, during the war in Syria. But if we look now what happened recently, more than 1 month now, actually, after the regime, the collapse of the Assad regime and Ba'ath regime, Syria has gone through many changes, actually. So the fall of the regime gave the opportunity, the first time opportunity for the Syrian people to be pleased and to think how to create a new country, democratic country, pluralistic country, based on all these principles. This is what we think about it. So Syria now, we enter the new year 2025 as the Syrian people with the new beginning in this year, thinking and their inspiration to have the democracy, pluralities, the freedom of religions, the women rights, the equal genders. All this is what we are dream of, and the Syrian people also, they are asking for. Building inclusive government. But now what happened? Who is in Damascus? HTS. What is the background of this group? Everybody knows. Everyone knows who are they. They were in Idlib, and every time, everyone from the United States to the European countries, all the people, they designated them as a terrorist group when they are in Idlib. Out of sudden, they came to Damascus now. So now we have seen a lot of, or many delegation, European delegation, Americans, they visited Damascus. But that doesn't mean they are now considering them or recognizing them as a legal government for Damascus. No. Everyone is coming there to see how are they doing, how will they behave, what is the system they are going to establish in the future. In the beginning now, they established like a government now, which is for 3 months, and this government, all of them are from the HTS. None, not even one of them outside of this group. So this is what makes the European countries also worried about. Where are the other Syrian components? Where are the Kurds? Where are the Syrian Christians? Where are the Alawite? Even though the Alawite are, maybe Mr. Hamid, he mentioned they were from the regime and like that, but doesn't mean that all the Alawite, they committed the crimes. Only the Alawite who were very affiliated with the regime, who has a very high position, they committed many crimes for the Syrian people. These must be judged and taken to the court. According to that, must be, given the legal decision for them. But what we are seeing now, we are seeing different things happening. Alawite now in the coast, they are very afraid, they are very frightened. They are going through a lot of violations, killing them, attacking them. And when somebody told, they say it is individual cases. Okay, individual cases, but you have to control it. That is not the way. So the collapse of the Syrian regime, it means the collapse of Iranian. And I think Mr. Hamit, he mentioned that. Iranian is not anymore the master in Syria. Russia is not anymore there ruling in Syria. So Hezbollah is be weakened and not anymore in Syria. So that is good. That is good for all the Syrian people. We as the Kurds, what we gain, what we achieve. Actually, when the Syrian people look at the Kurds, they say, oh, they are separatists. They want to separate. They want to divide Syria. That is not true. Kurdish people in Syria, they are, and they were in the beginning and still now, the main actor in falling the Syrian regime. We are the main actor. We played a very positive role in coming to this, what we are now in Damascus. Why? Who attacked Syria in 2013, 14, and 15 until 19? ISIS. ISIS attacked Syria. ISIS came, most of them, by the witness of the many American officials, they came from Turkey. At that time, we before establishing SDF, we were a YPG and all these smaller groups that were fighting in Kobani. And after the resistance there, the international committee, the international global coalition, they interfered and they became like a partnership of this group after seeing the resistance of our people in Kobani against this terrorist group and most brutal group in Kobani. So that time we started to have the partnership with the global coalition led by United States in counterterrorism of ISIS. We could defeat ISIS in Kobani, and then Kobani was the first step in defeating ISIS in all over Syria, at least in the northeast Syria. Till we get in 2019, that time Mr. Trump, he was the president, he declared the defeating ISIS in Syria in 2019 and collapsing the caliphate, the capital of Caliphate al-Raqqa city at that time. So in defeating ISIS, who paid these prices? We are. We paid more than 12,000 people all being martyred while fighting against ISIS. We protect all the humanity from this terrorist group. And we have seen many incidents happen in Europe, even recently in the United States. Some terrorist group, they tried to attack the people there. So imagine we couldn't defeat ISIS. Imagine now we are not able to guard the presence and a whole camp which hold more than 50,000 of the radical group there. What would happen? They will escape. They will come to Turkey, from Turkey to Europe, maybe to America, who knows? So we can liberate the large territory of Syria from the terrorist group. And we could establish a system that have the security, safety for 5 million people living in northeast Syria. 5 million people, that means Kurdish people, Arabs, Syrian Christian, Armenian, all of them, they've been protected in the area there. If we couldn't defeat ISIS, no one from the Christian people will stay in Syria after that. You will not find one Christian in Syria because they will be under threat of ISIS. But we protected all the people in Syria, And we were and are till now the main factor in getting this victory of the collapsing of the Syrian regime and Ba'ath regime. So for that, I'm telling you now, we have, did a lot of advantages for the Syrian people. Now, what is next? What is post-Assad now? There are a lot of challenges now we are facing. As soon as the Assad collapsed, we were happy, we chanting, we say, okay, we are also now free. But the next day, Turkey sent its mercenaries, Syrian National Army, to attack us in Manbij and Tishrin Dam and to Kobani. Why? Why now? Of course, before they were always chilling us and attacking us. But now, after the collapse of the Assad regime, why should they attack us now? So they want now to get the opportunity or advantages of this period, the transitional period in Syria and even in America, because we have now a new administration. It's coming on Monday. So for that, they are trying to control more and more cities so that they will be under their control and it will be a de facto. This is what they want. And they want to control Kobani again. So we are, we could, till now, we are fighting. Imagine all the people in Syria, they are happy, they are celebrating. We are fighting and we are paying now prices till now. Today, we have 3 martyrs, or they are civilians on the Tishrin Dam. Why? Why should the Syrian kill the other Syrian people where the regime has been collapsed? So we asked here the international community to stop this and to have now to give the opportunity for us to participate in building the new Syria. We want to build the new Syria. It is our country. We have many relations. We had, reached to the HTS there in Damascus, Al-Shara government, and we wanted to have a good dialogue with them in order to understand what we want in the next step. As you know, Syria is a diverse. It is not only one color, one language, one religion, whatever. We have Christians in Syria, we have Alawite, Yazidis, Sunni, Shia, whatever. And you have multi-ethnic also group, like Kurdish, like Arabs, Turkmen, Armenian, Syriac. So all these groups we have it is diverse. What is the best system for Syria to keep the security for all these components in Syria? We, according to us, we see that the decentralized, either federal or decentralized system, it is the best way. That is the way that you can guarantee the rights of all the components in Syria. But if if they want to go back to a central system like the Assad regime, who used to control the whole Syria and who used to control all the economic sources of Syria in his hand and neglecting and marginalizing many other places in Syria, that doesn't work. We suffered a lot from that 50 years with the Assad and the militia that they were running the country. Actually, they are like a mafia. They were ruling in Syria. So we don't want to have such a system repeated again. We have to guarantee in the Syrian constitution the rights of the Kurdish people in Syria. The right of we are not separatists. Let everybody know that federalism doesn't mean that it is separating the country or dividing it. Look at the United States, look at Switzerland, in Germany, in everywhere. It is not a separate. But it gives a chance, an opportunity for the people in this area to rule themselves, to have a sustainable development for their places, which will be good for all the Syrian people. So now what we have now, we have a lot of challenges in Syria. Let me start with the economic challenge. When the Syrian regime collapsed, it left a very heavy and very bad situation in the economy. Destroyed economy during 14 years of the war, and also due to the sanctions on Syria. All this happened. It led to a very weak economy now. So we don't have, we have, not opportunity for the young people to work. This is another, one of the challenges. The other challenge is the internal, conflict after the Assad collapse. Look at now what's going on in the coast. Alawite and this HTS or some radical groups there, they are attacking them, they are arresting them, they are killing them. A lot of, cases happen. This is one of the challenge that this is one of our challenge in Syria now. The other one is the poverty. Poverty now among all the Syrian people. No work, no jobs, no infrastructure. Everything is destroyed. So all these are challenges now for the Syrian people to build their country or rebuild it again. We have the displaced people in Syria, inside Syria. Many people now in Afrin, for instance. So far, it is liberated from it is, now free Syria. It has been like the Syria collapse, the regime has gone, and till now, Afrin is under occupation. Why? The Afrin people, they are not able to go back to their cities and villages. I am from Afrin. My family is displaced now there. Why couldn't they go? Finished, the Assad has gone. Why didn't the people are able to go to the Afrin again and to live there in their homes and houses? So till now, the people from Al-Ghouta who has been displaced to Afrin, they are not able, they are not allowing them. They want to go to Al-Ghouta, but they are not allowing them to go back to their homes. And the other challenge is that their homes is destroyed also, many of them. So all this, create a lot of problems. This government should solve it. But this government, is it going or is able to do it? Is it able to do it? That is the question. Is this government able to separate itself from the radicalism? And could they be able to control the militias that they are working with them, and now we are seeing them roaming in the street of Damascus and calling for the Islam and asking the people to be Muslim? This is another also challenge, and the people now they are upset. The other issue is the challenge of the environment. We have a lot of problem now in the environmental, a lack of water. We have a lack of water in Syria, as Turkey built the dams, and in Alok also. These all they have been a challenge for our people. Hasaka, we don't have water till now, and electricity, and so on. The other one is vast area of the trees and forests in the country, like Afrin, for instance, has been now like a desert became. They cut off most of the trees in Afrin. 1 million trees have been cut off in Afrin. So they changed the environment and the nature of Afrin from the green to a desert now in many areas in Afrin. So this is a challenge for Syria also, you know. The air pollution, I mean, according to the war, what's going on. In Afrin, destroying the archaeological sites, very old archaeological sites, destroying it. So that means they are making like a genocide for the nature, for the history of the Kurdish people in the region, and for the people also in Africa. It is a genocide committed by such a group, backed by Turkey, and they are ruling now Afrin so far. So all these really are, I mean, a lot of challenges. We have still another challenge, which we call, I mean, like security challenges, terrorists. Till now, we have a terrorist group in Syria, like ISIS. Don't think that we defeat ISIS, ISIS has finished or gone. No, still we have. Every day I mean, like SDF and internal security forces, they arrest many of the ISIS members in their zone or in the region there. And they are trying to commit a lot of crimes and trying to attack the prisons of the ISIS there so that they will be able to escape. Still, this is a challenge for us also in the region. According to this challenge, now, the attack of Turkey yesterday with the warplanes and with the drones and with the help of these mercenaries to attack us, you know, this will lead to resurgence of ISIS again. And this is the most dangerous, that all the Western countries, especially that America, they don't want to have it. Because they were partnership in defeating the ISIS, they don't want to have again to see ISIS resurgence again in the region. So the other one is the security issue is the border, like Turkey now. Turkey is trying to take 30 kilometers deep, as always Erdogan is trying to say, inside the Syrian territory. So that means the border, whole the border in the north of Syria is under threat. So we are now facing a lot of challenges post-Assad, and still we don't know how to work with the government in Damascus to solve all this challenge. Of course, there is another challenge, which is the interference of the regional country in Syria. That is very, very big challenge, you know. So the new government in Syria, is it going to stop that? We welcome all the interference, or I mean the assistance for the Syrian people, for any country to assist the Syrian people in the humanitarian issues, in the economic issues. We are happy to have that. Especially the United States, they release now the general license exemption of the sanctions, which is General License 24, which is give a lot of, humanitarian assistance and like supporting the Syrian people in electricity, in water, and so on. That is good. So we need to have the chance to live together, to work together, to build our city together and our country together with the inclusive government through the dialogue with Damascus. We want that, and we are happy to build our country as a decentralized country, a system that depends on the basic rights for all the people as it is in the Western countries. So this is what can I say. If there is any questions, I'm happy to answer. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Sinam. And now we will turn to Salim. He will speak about Turkey foreign policy interests versus domestic political realities. The floor is yours, Salim. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me and for organizing this. I will speak on a couple of issues. I'll try to talk. I'll first start with the assumption that Turkey had a consistent Syria policy. Erdogan has stick with his guns in a way and has eventually won. That is kind of the narrative that's dominant right now, both in Turkey and also globally speaking. Well, that's not really the case. I mean, there has been some consistencies, obviously, but there has been lots of changes in Turkey's Syria policy over the last 10, 15 years. I basically decide to prefer to divide Turkey's Syria policy into three phases. Since the Arab uprising, of course, I mean, I will not go back to old history, but since the Arab uprising, the first phase was Turkey's open attempt to overthrow the Assad regime. That's basically from 2011 to 2016. Turkey was supporting every kind of opposition. There was accusations that Turkey even allowed radical jihadist elements to fight against the Assad regime with the expectation that they are actually more effective fighting force compared to Turkey's proxies by the time it was called Syrian Free Army. So that was when Turkey, both rhetorically, politically, militarily, logistically, economically, tried to overthrow the Assad regime. But it failed. And I think when it became very clear that it failed was when Hamit Hoca also mentioned in his speech, the Aleppo, when Russians, in coordination with Turkey, allowed the regime to retake Aleppo, and the opposition forces that has been kind of trapped in Aleppo were allowed to leave Aleppo into at the time called as de-escalation zones inside Syria. From that point on, actually Turkey has realized that it's no longer possible to topple down Assad. At the rhetorical level, Erdogan stick to his guns. He claimed that Assad should go, we will never accept Assad, and etc. But at the political and more pragmatic level, Turkey has prioritized two goals over regime change. These were preventing new waves of migration towards Turkey and Turkey's attempts to undermine Kurdish autonomy on northwest, northeast Syria. These two goals, in a way, directed Turkey's Syria policy from 2016 onwards. Turkey made 4 military operations inside Syria. None of them targeted the Assad regime. Right? They were either attempting to undermine the Kurdish political structures established there or to prevent migration towards Turkey, as in 2020 when Turkey intervened to protect Idlib. So there has been a distinction between rhetoric and real policies. And from 2021-22 onwards, Turkey even gave up the rhetoric of overthrowing the Assad regime, right? Erdogan made several very public appeals to Assad. He said, let's go, we can have family holidays once again, like he used to have. He said, let's give up this tiny misunderstandings between us. These are terms that Erdogan used. Kırgınlıkları unutalım. That was the terms he used in Turkey. As if the entire story was some kind of a misunderstanding between Erdogan himself and Assad. So he kind of chased Assad to meet with him for 2 years, very publicly. And he failed. I mean, pretty much like he failed to topple down Assad, he also failed to make peace with Assad, to come to the table with Assad. So, I mean, I'm a bit surprised when people tell me about Turkey's Syria policy has been eventually successful. I mean, this is a series of failures. Turkey even failed to make peace with Assad. And when Assad is overthrown, it's not due to Turkey's rising power and influence, as Hamit Hoca very well explained. It's because the regime collapsed in a way in itself. Well, its external powers has weakened and the regime itself was rotten from to the core. And in a way, with a very tiny push, it all fell down. Now, where do we know this? I think it's very clear. People also close to the government now accept that when the HTS attack towards Aleppo started, nobody expected that this would end up in Damascus. It seems that Turkey's plan was that, of course, the attack was in coordination with Turkey. The plan seems to be attacking Assad in Aleppo, seizing some territories, and by that forcing Assad to come to the table that he didn't accept Erdogan's invitation up to that point. And in the table, probably, and this is not speculation, Turkey's expectation by making peace with Assad was to create a joint operation towards the Kurdish autonomy, or SDF, let's not call it Kurdish autonomy, towards the autonomous administration of northern eastern Syria. That was in a way the ultimate goal of Turkey, to make peace with Assad. Now, so when Assad is toppled, in a way Turkey achieved a goal that it has already abandoned. I mean, that wasn't Turkey's goal for the last 2 years. It was a past goal. It happened by itself. And in a way, this was a victory, I called a victory 10 years late. I mean, if that victory, quote unquote, happened 10 years ago, it would have a different meaning. When Turkey started to support the Syrian uprisings, it was in the context of Arab Spring. The idea that all these uprisings in the Arab countries would succeed, overthrow the regimes, Tunisia, then Egypt, then Libya, then it would come to Syria, and all these authoritarian Arab regimes would collapse, and in the wake, new forces very close to AK Party would come. One of my friends calls it, there would be many AK Party franchises all over the Arab world. That was the plan back at the time. And if the Syrian revolution had succeeded, that would have a lot of meanings in Turkey's regional design. But that policy has failed, and Turkey has gave up on that regional design 2 years ago. When Turkey made peace with Sisi, Erdogan said he would never sat at the same table with a putschist, a murderer. Well, these are all true terms to define Sisi, but when he said he would never meet with him. When he visited Abu Dhabi to meet with MBS, who is, quote unquote, the mastermind behind Turkey's 15 July coup, right? The financier of it. When Turkey transferred the Khashoggi case and made peace with Saudi Arabia. So Turkey actually gave up its aims to design the region and in a way made peace with authoritarian status quo Arab regimes. And the Syrian toppling down Assad came in this context. So this has a very different meaning at this moment. What Turkey, I think, is trying to make it very clear, and HTS also very in parallel, is trying to make it very clear that this is a Syria thing. It doesn't have any regional implications. It won't have any regional implications. Erdogan fly to Cairo to meet with Sisi immediately. Like, rest assured, this is inside Syria. We weren't even expecting this. Of course, I wasn't in the meeting, but I'm trying to imagine what he could have told. We didn't even expect Assad to go. This is a Syria thing. So Turkey is trying to send the message that we are not going back to 2011. We have no regional ambitions. This is only in Syria. It will not have a trickle-down effects in Jordan, in Egypt, in UAE. This is the message that Turkey is trying to send. And I think this is also the message that HTS is trying to send. It's not a coincidence that Jolani or Ahmet al-Shara, whichever name he prefers, made his most important remarks in Al Arabiya, in a Saudi TV channel. The first trip of the new foreign minister is to Saudi Arabia, and then he went to Jordan and Emirates. And then now he is in Turkey, but as the fourth destination. These are all to send the message that HTS is now focusing entirely on Syria. The revolution, so-called, is focusing, targeted only Assad, and it doesn't have any regional ambitions and implications. This also shows that Turkey is aware of its limitations. And what is the goal that Turkey is now expecting within this victory? There are a couple of things that we could count. First is, of course, very immediately, Erdogan's popularity has raised in Turkey, because after this years and years of defeats in Syria, now it recreated his image of a strong leadership. But remember that he so far didn't visit the Umayyad Mosque. So this idea that he would soon pray, I think he said it in 2011-12, I don't remember exactly, that he would soon pray in the Umayyad Mosque. That was the ambitious goal he had 15 years ago. Today, I think very wisely, he canceled that visit, that high-profile visit that could scare other Arab countries, that would send a different message. Despite all the benefits that he would get at the domestic politics, he didn't go to Damascus yet. I think very wisely, but I don't know how can he resist this temptation that he could use this at domestic politics, because foreign policy is always conducted for domestic political gains primarily. But so far he resisted that ambition. And if we leave aside that popularity thing, I think, well, obvious thing is that Syria's reconstruction requires, there are different estimates starting around $400 billion to up to $1 trillion. Turkey will probably be the biggest beneficiary of this. I mean, I find it a bit shameful, but at the day Assad is toppled, all Turkish construction companies boomed in the stock market. Again, I mean, economically very wise decision, but you can question the morality behind it. But obviously, Turkey will receive a big boom of this construction thing. And that's why I think Turkey is very well on board with HTS, that Saudi Arabia should be kind of lead the process, because obviously Turkey doesn't have those resources. Pretty much like HTS is, Turkey is also expecting to gain from abroad, from the financial aid. So when I also don't understand how Turkish opposition can, in a way, criticize HTS foreign minister's trip to Saudi Arabia. I think Turkey was very happy with that. I mean, go find some money, and with those money, some of it will go to Turkey. That's, I'm sorry, that's kind of the plan in Ankara. Refugee returns, I think we have to be very careful here. The expectation that Syrian refugees would go back to Syria soon is very unrealistic, and it has the danger of making already tense relations inside Turkey even worse. There has been already a lot of anti-refugee sentiment rising high. There has been kind of pogroms and communal attacks on Syrians. We know from their first-hand experiences that they face kind of daily racism. It's not unexpected but sad, but they are going through a very tense times in Turkey. With if the message, the public diplomacy side of it is not well managed, this will make things even worse for the Syrians. People would say, okay, the war is over. Why? They have been saying this narrative, but they will say it now more forcefully. Well, why are you still here? Go back. But of course, we know that there's nothing to go back. I mean, Syria is not an effective state. It's not a functioning economy. And as I said, its rebuilding requires almost $1 trillion, according to some estimates. So it's not realistic to expect that Syrians would go back in large numbers. Of course, there might be some individual cases, but it will never be in the hundreds of tens of thousands that the government expects. And the raising this expectation would further undermine the stability inside Turkish society, further undermine the Syrian refugees' social standing there. And in that sense, the same also applies for Europe too. I mean, when Europe thinks about Syria, their primary issue is migration, as if there is nothing else. And they only approach it from a migration perspective. But there, the idea that Syrians should go back very soon is very unrealistic. And it's also, in a way, I would say, undermining Syrians' own return. The idea that they either go back, and if they go back, they can never come again. I mean, I'm putting myself inside the shoes of a Syrian refugee in Germany. I wouldn't go to an unknown place. So there must be some more relaxed attitude from European governments to allow Syrians to go back to Syria, and that shouldn't, in a way, cancel the residency statutes of migrant communities. If this flexible attitude is adopted, I think there would be more returns. The rigid policy, in a way, prevents Syrians to try going back to Syria. And from aside these goals, Turkey's consistent policy to undermine Kurdish autonomy inside Syria is still there, and seems to be still the dominant policy paradigm for Syria. At the moment, we can talk about 4 big armed factions inside Syria. So if we take Weber's definition of state as a legitimate monopoly of violence, Syria is not really a state at the moment. There are at least 4 groups. First is, of course, the HTS, who controls Damascus. And then there is Syrian National Army. And then there is SDF. And then there is this so-called Southern Operations Room, the Southern rebels that suddenly emerged. I mean, I wasn't aware that they were such a big factor, but they were the first group to enter Damascus in 8 December. Now, of all these 4 groups, 3 of them has direct relations with Turkey. HTS is a Turkish partner. I mean, it was unofficial until recently, but there's no more need to hide that. It's very officially Turkey's partner. But it's not Turkey's proxy in the same way of SNA, the Syrian National Army. The Syrian National Army is Turkey's proxy. It's kind of Turkey's mercenaries, let's put it that way, very, very bluntly. And Turkey defines SDF as kind of a nemesis. So that makes Turkey very important for Syria's future, that Turkey's relations with these armed groups and how these armed groups will coordinate their relations with each other. And on the top of this also, there are more than 10,000 Turkish soldiers inside Turkey. And Turkey is keeping under control Syrian territory at the moment, under occupation. So far, as I said, HTS is a junior partner of Turkey, but obviously not a proxy. I don't think that HTS designs its policies by orders from Ankara, whereas the Syrian National Army is Turkey's mercenary. Turkey gives the money, gives the orders, and they act. We've seen this also in their different attitudes after the fall of Aleppo. Once they captured Aleppo, HTS forces moved south towards Damascus, whereas Turkey's proxies inside Syrian army moved to the east and continued to attack YPG SDF forces. They captured Manbij and Tel Abyad. So they prioritized attacking the SDF groups, forces, and YPG groups, than attacking Assad, which tells us again something about Turkey's priorities as well. It's no longer toppling down Assad. It wasn't since 2016, as I said. It was always preventing a Kurdish autonomy. There was always a bigger goal compared to undermining Assad regime. So far, HTS has refrained from Turkish pressure to attack SDF. I think there are 2 reasons for that. One is the capability. I mean, HTS is reported to have around 30,000 fighting force. Okay, they control Damascus. They are the biggest armed group inside Syria, and etc. But this is not enough to control a country like Syria. It's already very thin. HTS is already running thin in the areas that it's controlling. Sinam Mohamad has complained about these individual attacks, the constant attacks on the Alawites, on other minorities happening from HTS, and HTS always says it was an individual thing, it's isolated. That's not our policy. I mean, of course, we can always question their sincerity, and I'm not on the ground, but from what I understand from people on the ground is that, yes, indeed, these are not a policy centralized from Damascus. They seem to be more individual, but it also tells us how HTS command is not being able to control its own ranks, and obviously not able to control all the territories that it captured. So given this limited number of personnel, it's totally unwise for them to attack the SDF. So that's one reason probably that they have so far resisted Turkish demands to that. And I think they will continue to resist those demands. And the second is, of course, they want to break down the political, economic isolation. They want to get rid of the sanctions. So they desperately need American and European support. Not both economic support, but also political support. They need to get rid of the terrorism. HTS, by the way, is still on the terrorism list of the United Nations Security Council, not on a single or 2 countries or 3 countries. It has been a designated terrorist organization by the United Nations Security Council. So they desperately need global help to get first rid of that list and then to break the sanctions. So under these conditions, they will not follow Turkey's demands, pleas, requests that they should attack the SDF. So let's come to what will lie in front of Turkey regarding to its relations with SDF. I think there is a hypocrisy here, because Turkey's narrative when it comes to HTS is that HTS is transformed, right? That's the narrative. it was, yes, once an Al-Qaeda branch, the same leader, Jolani, the same people, the same fighting force, but Turkey wants us and the global world to believe that it's now a different organization. By the way, I'm not against this narrative. And to be honest, I mean, I think there is some truth into this narrative, but this is Turkey's narrative. HTS is no longer the organization that it was 8 years ago. Jolani is a different person. This is Turkey's narrative. And this is the narrative that I think the global public is also accepting slowly. So, okay, HTS has transformed, despite not a single individual changed, the same leader, the same key personnel, the same people, but it's now a different organization. Fine. But when it comes to SDF, Turkey argues that this is an extension of PKK and it can't change. Those people had shared some ideological bonds with PKK. There has been some organizational links as well at some years ago. Because of that organizational link, it has to remain, it has to be considered a branch of PKK, and we can never change this argument. That's the hypocrisy that I'm talking about. A branch of Al-Qaeda can become transformed, but an organization, a branch of PKK, let's put it that way, can never be transformed. HTS can give up being a transnational jihadist organization into a Syrian Islamic militant group, but SDF cannot become, or YPG cannot become from a transnational Kurdish liberation movement into a Syrian organization focusing on the rights of Kurds and other minorities. That's the narrative that Turkey is trying to promote, and I think that's where Turkey's narrative is very weak on, very difficult to convince other people, I would say. But that seems to be still Turkey speaks from the high pitch. SDF should dismantle itself and etc. But I'm not sure, to be honest, if Turkey will stick to this inconsistency for too long. And I think there are two parameters that would shape Turkey's policy vis-a-vis SDF and vis-a-vis the Kurds in Syria. One of them is, of course, Trump and the American commitment to preserving the SDF there militarily. That's a big unknown. The second is, that's where my title was domestic politics. I spoke mostly about foreign policies, but that's where the domestic politics comes. The second is the so-called new process that none of us really know much about, that started with when Bahçeli said that Mr. Öcalan should come and speak in the parliament and call the dissolvement of PKK and etc. Since then, it has been 2-3 months now. We don't know where this will go. I'm among people who approach this from a more pessimistic approach. I don't think this is part of a regional design. I see it more of a domestic political move. And when I say domestic political move, I'm not talking about just securing Kurdish votes in a future election. I think it's a bit more than that. It's kind of an attempt to broaden Turkey's broaden the public base of Turkey's authoritarian regime. At the moment, it's a weak authoritarian regime. It's not hegemonic enough. It's powerful, but not hegemonic, I would call. So it's an attempt to broaden its base. It's all speculation. We don't know where it will go. But I think that process and how Erdogan's domestic policies vis-a-vis the Kurds would evolve will have a lot of impact on Turkey's Syria policy and vice versa, by the way. How Turkey's Syria policy would evolve, how the future of SDF, the autonomous administration there, how the bargaining or negotiations between the autonomous administration and the Damascus regime will evolve, will also shape Turkey's new process. I mean, that's the name, I guess we call it the process now. There's no other name so far, between Mr. Erdogan, Mr. Bahçeli, and Mr. Öcalan so far. So now I started with lots of observations. Now I totally reached to the realm of speculation because we don't know how this will evolve. But I think these two factors will be determinant: Trump's commitment and the process inside Turkey, how it will affect Turkey's policies on Syria and on SDF. So I'll stop here.
Thank you very much, dear Salim. As moderator, I allow myself one question before I open the QA session for the other participants. At the end, Salim, you mentioned a very important point, the so-called process of dialogue, or the first steps of a dialogue with Kurdish political leader Abdullah Öcalan. Hamit, may I ask you also to comment shortly on it? How serious is this approach, especially in the framework of the attacks on the Kurds or the Kurdish achievements in Syria?
I think that, as Çevik explained, we are in a very speculative level. It is still impossible to see where we can go from this speculative level to another level, which will be maybe not the resolution of the Kurdish conflict, but at least some kind of peace. When you take Erdogan's discourse and actually Bahçeli's discourse, they are converging. They are insisting on two facts. First, the PKK is a terrorist organization and there is no Kurdish issue in Turkey. And second, there is no Kurdish issue in Syria. So reducing everything to the issue of terrorism means that you deny the existence of the Kurdish issue. And at the same time, this issue that you deny is still there and explains what happens in Turkey since 100 years. And it explains also what happens in the Middle East. The threats of Erdogan, they are constant. And I think that the first point that Çevik has underlined is very important. What the United States will do. I looked at the profiles of the main leaders, the foreign minister, the secretary of the state, the secretary of the National Security Agency, the secretary of the National Intelligence Agency, as well as the profile of Lindsey Graham. I think that all these people, they do not want Turkey to intervene in Syria, neither to become a dominant actor in Syria. Maybe economically, yes, that will be okay. But reducing Syria into a colony and destroying the Kurdish society, the Kurdish territory, is not in their interest. And another factor which is very important to see also is the Turkish-Israeli relations. They have worsened considerably since a couple of years. And 2 days ago, only 2 days ago, for the first time, the foreign ministry of Israel has qualified Turkey as an imperialist power and giving a kind of ultimatum. So there are the factors that we have to take into consideration. There is another factor that intervenes, and I think that Çevik, you are also aware of that. For the first time, we have a kind of rapprochement between the Rojava and the KRG. Mazlum Abdi was in Erbil Hewler today. That was the desire, the hope, the dream of so many Kurds that there is no more Bırakıcı. It means the fraternal law between the Kurds, that the Iraqi Kurds, they win some kind of autonomy vis-a-vis Turkey and vis-a-vis Iran, and that there is a Kurdish internal integration. Maybe we will also see the beginning of this rapprochement, and I think that here too, probably the Americans, they have played a role. And what does it mean, this rapprochement? It means to banalize actually the Rojava example, to banalize the SDF, to banalize the Kurdish military forces, transforming them into a Kurdish normal Syrian forces. To what extent that will continue, I don't know. As I said, there is a kind of Turkish ideology which is there since the Abdul Hamit period, 1894, 1896, which imposes the Turkish superiority, the idea that the Turkish nation has the right to dominate the world, the idea of the absolute superiority of the Turkish nation on the other nations, the denial of the existence of the Armenians, of the Bulgarians, of the Greeks, or whatever you can imagine, and of course of the Kurds as a collective subject of their own history. So those factors are there. The Turkish ideology is there. But I think that ultimately what the Trump administration will decide will be the determining factor. And I think that in the European countries, you are in Germany, I am in France, in the European countries, no one wants the Turkey to destroy the Kurdish areas. And everyone does agree that the Kurds have to have their place in the future of Syria, not as a Syrian citizens, but as a collective subject of the Syrian society. And that's also true for the other communities. You mentioned, I think that you are absolutely right, the existence of these military forces in southern Syria, they can make defection, looking towards Jordan, actually. They are not necessarily interested in becoming a single part of Syria. They want some form of recognition. Take the case of the Druze community. The Druze community has almost given an ultimatum to Damascus. Either you accept us with our military forces, or we will seek an Israeli protectorate. So if Syria wants to survive tomorrow, and I think that Sinam Hanım has really explained it wonderfully. If Syria wants to survive tomorrow, Syria has to be pluralistic. This pluralism can take the shape of a federation, can take the shape of a very accelerated, very dependent, decentralized policy, but a unitary Syrian and Arab Syrian Republic, as Erdogan wants it, will be a disaster. It means that no one will affiliate himself to the new government. And don't forget, the HTC is fragile. Syrian society is extremely fragile. In 2011, the Syrian society, the demography, just take the demography. When we say Syria, that was around 22, 23 million of people. Today, 500,000 people have been killed. At least 7-8 million of Syrians, they are outside the country, and there are 5 or 6 million of Syrians internally displaced. So the half of the population has disappeared almost. So the Syrian regime cannot envision a policy of harsh repression of its communities, as that was the case, for instance, of the Khomeini regime in 1979, 1980. The society is much weaker, and the HTC is extremely weak. You have explained, I think that you are absolutely right. The HTC has refused any kind of plural government for while being. The existing government is a militia government, an Islamist militia government. But such a government cannot continue in the future, or there will be a new catastrophe waiting for the country.
Thank you. Now we are starting with the QA session, and the participants who listened for almost more than 1 hour are able to ask questions to our 3 excellent speakers. Please, Mr. Göcek, Mrs. Göcek.
Thank you very much for these amazing contexts that you have given. Especially, I'm concerned about the role Turkey is going to play in the region. I see a lot of continuities with what happened during, as Hamit also mentioned, the Armenian genocide. My worries are that there's going to be a similar genocide in Syria against the Kurds if we do not have the support of the West there, and if Turkey is allowed to have a role in the region going forward, especially. But I know that Turkey has to be a political actor. But if you look at the Bahçeli-Erdoğan, let's say, rule, I think that rule is definitely authoritarian. It will continue to be authoritarian, and it hasn't changed, I think, its emphasis on basically destroying the Kurds and highlighting and privileging the Islamists. So I wonder, am I right in these worries? What do the panelists think? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Fatma. Maybe we will take some more questions and then the panelists can answer. Dear Mrs. Dinch, please.
Hello everyone, and thank you for this panel. Nice to see you, Salim, after many years, and Hamit Hoca and Miss Mohamad. My question actually takes a different approach from Fatma Müge Göcek Hoca's. I'm wondering more about the role of the West here. I mean, Salim was talking about this hypocrisy, to which I very much agree with, it being a hypocrisy. And I've actually written a piece that is coming out on the Conversation tomorrow, where I ask, like, why aren't we even discussing what the Kurdish Autonomous Administration has built there in the past 12-13 years? I mean, there is all of these challenges and questions that Hamit Hoca was addressing in his speech about, you know, will it be pluralistic? Will it be acknowledging different peoples and different ethnic or religious groups and so on? I mean, there has been an example in Syria, in northern East Syria, with direct democracy, with gender emancipation, with ecology focus, these three pillars. And what we have been seeing is, of course, a Western support in terms of military support, but there is almost no political acknowledgement of what has been practiced on the ground by the Kurds and their allied groups. So I'm wondering what the panelists would like to say about the West's hypocrisy here. Why Al-Shara or Jolani or whatever name he chooses now, why is he considered a legitimate actor, a potential leader for Syria's future, when there is almost no talk, except, of course, maybe protecting their allies on the ground, but there's no talk of the model that has been built. So I would like to hear our esteemed panelists' opinions on this, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We have also two questions in the chat. They are questions for Sinam. The participant is asking, is there a dialogue between SDF and Israel? Can the Kurdish people consider Israel as an ally in the Middle East? And the second question, you mentioned that you would wait and see how the HDS is forming the future government. Shouldn't the SDF take a major role in forming the future government? How could you achieve that? And we will take the question from Mrs. Bochenska, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this very, very interesting panel. I wanted to ask about two things. Actually, how would you evaluate this as if growing support from the side of Israel now that we are witnessing? To what extent you consider it deep when it comes to SDF and the Kurds in Syria? And I also wanted to ask about this small formation EHESS that was opposite in a way to SDF. And we witnessed today meeting between Mazlum Abdi and Barzani. And it seems that EHESS didn't take part in this meeting. And how this relation, is it still a partner in this dialogue, or has it been tick off as a partner? And to what extent you believe this group can play any role in positive or negative in Kurdish Syrian Kurds' future in coming, if any role in coming months? Thank you.
Thank you. Salim, please.
Yeah, I want to follow up on the questions in the chat, whether SDF should play a kind of a leading role. I would like to ask Sinam Mohamad about the dialogue, the level of dialogue between SDF and HTS, actually. I mean, we know that there have been some meetings, but what is the level of, where are the disagreements, and are there any points that have been already agreed upon? Could you elaborate on that?
Okay, then we will start with Sinam for the answers, as most of the questions are related with you and addressed to you, please.
So there are many questions. I think the one is about the dialogue between the SDF and HTS in Damascus. This is what I think I'm seeing here. You know, as the HTS or the government is Damascus is now there, and many of the Western countries, they are trying to help it to get away from the radicalism. And as it is now in Damascus, we are in the northeast Syria, we have to make a dialogue with that. And we are open to any dialogue in order to solve the problems and to clarify our vision for the future of Syria. That's very obvious and clear. So our military, in the beginning, the military groups, I mean, from HTS and the SDF, they started to coordinate on the level of coordination. That time in the beginning, when the Syrian National Army started to attack in Tel Rifat and Shahba region, that time. So we need to coordinate with them in order to open a corridor to evacuate 125,000 of the displaced people of Afrin to a very secure and safe place that time. This is what happened. So this is the first coordination with HTS. Then later on, a meeting happened between also the SDF and the HTS, between both leaders, and they discussed about many issues in the future of Syria. Of course, we didn't sign any agreement so far, but we could make a dialogue, we could discuss the future of Syria, and we asked it to have, there are a lot of issues. So there is a lot of issues like the federalism, like the natural resources, and the borders, all these issues. We asked it to have a committee, to establish committees like political committees, military committees, economy committees, or administrative committee, in order to discuss the details of all these points. So we are ready for that. So far, they didn't start it yet. But we are, as I mentioned, we are ready to start all this dialogue with the HTS in order to avoid any conflict now. Because any conflict in Syria, it is not for the advantage of the Syrian people now. We're fed up with 14 years of war. So this is regarding the HTS. The other questions about the, I think, Israeli and the autonomous administration. We heard from the Israel officially also that they are supporting the Kurd in Syria. We really welcome anyone, any regional countries who is supporting the Kurdish people or the Syrian people in order to reach to stability and to reach to a dialogue or to build a new Syria. This is what we need now. We need that support. It's very important to have such support to build the new Syria now. What kind of Syria? We don't want to go back, as I mentioned, to centralized Syria. So we need the support of all the regional countries, including Israel, which is on the border of Syria. So we need that. The safety of Syria is the safety of Israel and all the regional countries. The security of Syria is the security of Jordan and Saudi Arabia and Israel and Turkey. So we have to know that. Because of that, we are open and we thanks, grateful to all the groups of the countries that they are supporting and declaring to support the Kurdish people. This is really, we are open to that and we appreciate that support. I don't know what is the other question.
There was another question regarding today's meeting between SDF Commander Mazlum Abdi and Ms. Barzani.
Yes. So this meeting, it happened before with the meeting with the representative or the envoy of the Mr. Masoud al-Barzani, Hamid Darbandi, to the Rojava. When he went, he came to Rojava and he met with the General Mazloum, and he met with the other group, which is the National Kurdish Council. So it is like invitation to Mr. General Mazloum to go and meet with Kak Masoud Barzani. That is a very important step for the Kurdish, regarding the Kurdish issue. As I said, Kurd in Syria, they are a main factor in the security and the stability of Syria. If there is no stability for the Kurdish people, Syria will not be stable. Everyone in Syria must know that. If the Kurds are under threat, Syria, all Syrian people will be under threat. No stability, no safety, no security for all over Syria if Kurds are not secure and safe. This is very obvious. For that, we in Syria, we have a lot of differences between the parties in Syria, political parties, PNK, many other parties who are in the administration, and with the National Syrian Council, the anarchists they call it also, who were with the other side in Turkey with the opposition coalition in the opposition of Syria at that time. We have a lot of differences. We have a lot of problems among us, but now, after the regime collapse, it is now time for the Kurdish people to come together and to see what is the common vision for the Kurds for the future of Syria. We have to agree to that. It doesn't make any sense that only the Kurds in Syria, like PYD or the other group who are working, I mean, the political parties in Syria who are in the autonomous administration, will go alone to Damascus without the other group who are National Kurdish Council, and then everybody will go alone separate, and they will have different project or different vision, so that the other will not take you into, seriously. So for that, now it is very critical situation in Syria for the Kurdish people. So we have to come together, sit together. In 2012, 2013, we tried, I was in that delegation in Hawler, in the agreement of Hawler 1, Hawler 2, in the Hawk also 1. I was in all this discussion that time, and we reached to an agreement together. We established like the High Kurdish Committee that time, but unfortunately, it doesn't, work. It was stopped. So now everything has been changed. The situation has been changed. The regime of Assad has got collapsed. Now we are building a new Syria. What is the role of Kurdish people in Syria? If we have a democratic Syria, Kurdish will have their own right. But what is the right of the Kurdish people there? Is it just, okay, you are like any other Syria? No, we have our, specialized things in Syria as a Kurds. We have to guarantee our rights, political rights in the constitution, cultural right, language, everything must be in the new constitution of Syria. For that, it is now very essential that all the Kurdish parties in Syria come together, sit together, agree at a common vision so that we can go to Damascus, negotiate in Damascus about the Kurdish rights in the future of Syria. This is very important step. This is guaranteed by the Americans, by France, and with the help of the Kak Masoud and the KRG region. I mean, there, it is really very important. I would like to thank all the parties that they are participating now and they are working on that to happen. And I hope it will happen. I'm sure it will happen. I'm sure. Because now it is very critical situation. We have to come together. We have to agree together. We have to leave all the differences, all the problems away from us now behind our back and start a new state. This is what we have to do. As all the Syrian people have to do that. You know, this is, we don't want to fight now. It is time to build. War has ended, fighting end, now the building steps started. And we are ready for that building. So I appreciate now Kak Masoud also initiative with the help of the Americans and also France, I'm sure of that. And this is a good step for us. Wish all the best for all the Kurdish people and the Syrian people. Because if Kurdish people succeed in that, all the Syria also will be succeed. Thank you. I don't know if we have any other questions.
Yes, thank you. Maybe Hamit and Salim can answer the other questions, especially the first two questions. Maybe we start with Hamit and then continue with Salim.
Okay, thank you so much. Actually, I have something to say about all the questions, but of course,
Yes.
my dear
Sure.
friend Salim will also intervene. Concerning the first question, unfortunately, Fatma Miguel is not there, and we are right now not in a genocidal context, but there are some patterns. Take the situation in 1913, 1914. During this period, the Turkish discourse, the discourse of Community Union and Progress, which was the leading party, not leading party, the party which has monopolized the power, was this: we, the Turks, we accept that you Armenians, you do exist. We, the Turks, we accept that you have been even suffering from some injustices. But now that we have accepted you, you have to be at the order of the Turkish nation. And that's because the Armenians, they refused that and wanted to transform the Ottoman Empire, rebuild on the Ottoman Empire on the new grounds that the genocide took place. I think that we should never forget that. And second point, 2013, 2014, the so-called peace process. And in that, the discourse was exactly the same for the Kurds. We accept that you, the Kurds, you exist. We accept that you have even suffered. We accept what happened in Dersim, but in 1938 and 1939. But now that we have accepted that, you have to be at the order of the Sunni Turkish nation. And that's because the Syrian Kurds decided not to be at the order of the Turkish nation, not to follow the jihadists, and to opt for a third way that all this repression took place, and that Turkey has supported the jihadists. So I think that we have to be aware of that. We are not in a genocidal context like in 1914, 1915, but we are in a context of mass violence. And I think that Sinam Mohamad has explained that what happened in Afrin. Afrin was Kurd to up to 90%. Today, Afrin is Kurd up to 10%. So there is a massive violence, and we should be aware that this pattern has not changed and will not change unless Turkey democratizes itself. And I do not think that given the present power bloc in Turkey will democratize. Pınar, many thanks for your question, which is very important. I must confess that for me, for while being, the most or almost the unique issue is the survival of the Rojava. As a territory, as an entity, as a collective group. But I will still answer to your question also. We know that the democracies can be covered. That's why I compare always the situation of Rojava with the situation of the Spain between 1936 and 1939. In Spain, the democracy could have been saved, the republic could have been saved, but the democracies decided not to support democracy in Spain. Hitler and Mussolini had intervened in Spain in order to destroy the republic, and France and Great Britain, as well as the United States, they decided to remain neutral. And we have here a pattern. And this pattern led to the Second World War. If democracy had been saved in Spain, probably the situation of the European countries would have been much different. And we have to be aware of that. The democracies are not the courageous entities. And today we have even worse. We have the anti-democratic movements or tendencies within the democratic countries. Alternative für Deutschland shows it. Or when you take actually the ideology of Trump, Trump shares everything with Erdogan, with Putin, with Xi Jinping, and nothing with the American Democrats. So there is a crisis of democracy today. We have to be aware of that. And that's why I say that what is for me the most important today is really very egoistically the survival of the Rojava. And that will be also my question concerning Israel and Kurdish relations with Israel. Well, everyone knows, at least those who know me, that I have always supported and I will always support the Palestinian struggle, which is for me a national struggle. I have never been anti-Israelis, but I have been always extremely critical of the Israeli politics and on the conditions that have been imposed upon the Palestinians. And I remember, I recall always what Marx said, a people that oppresses another people cannot be free. And at the same time, I know that today the Kurds have no other choice than to accept, and you are right, Ms. Mohamad, any kind of support that's coming from any country. Once again, because we are in the issue of survival, but we should at least never forget our duty of solidarity with Palestine. And your second question is very important too, and I think that the answer has come. Actually, the Cancer has all its place, has to be a part of the Kurdish entity. And at the same time, when you see the disruptive effects of the war, particularly until 2015, 2016, there have been so much dramatic changes in gender relations, in generational relations, in class relations, that the former Kurdish parties could not have been able to tackle with the situation. But today, a new situation has been created. And of course, I do agree with you. And I am very grateful to what you said, Sinam Mohamad. Today, we are in a new situation. The Kurdish internal integration is absolutely necessary within the Iraqi Kurdistan, between the Iraqi Kurdistan and the Rojava, and between the Kurds of Rojava. And the last question, I must also insist on that fact. And please, Ms. Mohamad, allow me to say that, but you can correct me. Actually, since 6 last months, there have been relations between the Rojava and the HTC. The HTC, the Bashar al-Assad regime, wanted the Kurds to intervene in Aleppo, and the Kurds have refused. The Kurds maybe could have some force to do that, but they have refused. And if Bashar al-Assad regime has been toppled down, there is also a significant role of the Kurds of the Rojava in this evolution. That's not only the HTC. The HTC, once again, bear it in mind, has conquered Aleppo with only 36 Toyota, and in each of these Toyotas, you could have only 10 men. Aleppo fall, as Mosul fall in 2014, 1,300,000 people, a population of 1,300,000, 85, 89, and 90,000 of armed men within the city, and the jihadists were a couple of hundreds. So we have the situation of the falling off, disintegration of the societies. That was actually the strong point of HTC. But if the Kurds decided to ally themselves with the regime of Bashar al-Assad, the situation could have been different. And I am very happy that they didn't it.
Thank you very much, Hamit. Salim.
No, I don't have much to add. I generally agree with Hamit Hoca, but let me say a few words nevertheless. If the autonomous administration, if the Rojava is a model, I know, Pınar, I remember from many years ago that you worked over this model, and honestly, I don't know that much. I'm not sure if they really overcome the nation state paradigm, if anyone can. I'm not also very sure if it is pluralistic as it has been advertised. Forgive me for if this is a wrong choice of word, but as it has been claimed, let's put it that way. Also regarding the Kurdish pluralism, I think that it wasn't as plural as it claims to be. But on the other hand, I also understand that it was also very revolutionary as survival model. I see that there are limitations of pluralism when you are under constant attack and survival mode. So we will see from now on to the extent of how much, for instance, other Kurdish groups, Kurdish National Council and other groups are integrated inside the power bloc inside Syria, within the autonomous administration, etc. In that sense, I think this meeting in Erbil is very important. I agree with that. These will send a more clear signals how sustainable this model is actually, I think. When it comes to Fatma Hoca's genocide, I think we should use these words very sparsely and carefully. I don't think there is a genocide going on. There is a big risk.
That's why I said that we are not in a genocidal context.
Yeah, that's why I said I merely agree with you. In most of the words that I've said and I will say, I mostly agree with you. There is this Kurdish political and collective rights are under threat. That's obvious. Turkey in the past, in its operations, have committed war crimes. There are reports of Turkey's military committing war crimes, attacking civilian infrastructure, etc. We might see more of this, but genocide is a very different level. So I don't think we should use this. Israel and US, one reason for United States to commit to protecting Kurds is to also the fact that they are in a way controlling the border with Iraq at the moment, and that's key for preventing further Iranian encroachment back to Syria. So in that sense, and that's an Israeli agenda. So in that sense, Israeli support within the Congress could be important. But nevertheless, I mean, and I don't expect Kurds to reject that support. But I have to say that Israel is a threat to regional security. Israel is a threat to Syrian stability. Israel is a threat to Syrian security. And at the moment, Israel is occupying Syrian territory. Not only that it has been occupying the Golan Heights since 1974, it has expanded its occupation zone enormously. So Turkey is not the only occupying force inside Syria. Turkey is occupying certain areas inside Syria, but Israel is also occupying certain territories inside Syria. But also so far, I haven't seen the Damascus regime also saying anything against it. All the signals from HTS is that we are not a threat to you. They even kind of justified Israel's occupation and attacks. They bombed Damascus. They bombed the entire Syrian territory. They bombed the military infrastructure. Nothing came off from HTS. So at the normative level, I think Israel is a rock state that I personally would never want to be affiliated or wouldn't require its support. But at a political level, I can understand why Kurds wouldn't refuse that hand, given that the so-called jihadists also has nothing to say against Israel's occupation inside Syria. That's.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, dear Sinam, Salim, and Hamit, for participating in this panel debate and sharing your expertise with us. All three speeches were excellent as expected. And thank you for all participants joining our panel and listening the last 2 hours to these excellent speakers. Looking very much forward to seeing you again on another occasion. Maybe once we will meet and talk about a really revolution in the Middle East. No one knows, but we will continue our fight with this hope. So I wish you all the best and hope to see you again soon. Bye.
Thank you.
For the invitation. Thank you so much for your presence.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye bye.
Thank you, Salim. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.